I want you to imagine basically the most grueling, unforgiving physical training you can possibly conjure up in your mind.
Oh, man. Like the absolute worst of the worst.
Exactly. Picture an extreme military boot camp, right?
Right.
The kind that is specifically designed to just break a person down to their absolute core.
Mm-hmm.
Now, take that image and strip away literally any modern safety protocols, multiply the brutality by 100, throw in a suffocating cloud of toxic smoke.
Naturally.
Right. Add a pair of superheated magical claws, and then wrap that entire scenario in this, like, level of personal devotion that borders on just being deeply terrifying.
Yeah, it creates a profoundly unsettling mixture of, physical violence and psychological conditioning.
It really does. And
Okay.
today's deep dive is taking us straight into the heart of that exact scenario. We are exploring a really gripping narrative excerpt from Chapter 2 of a text called Master's Lessons.
It is such an intense chapter.
It really is. And our mission here for you today is to unpack the survival mechanics of this mystical warrior class, decipher the lore of a world that has literally been shattered, and really examine the psychology of a protagonist who is, willing to lay down his life for a single moment of acknowledgement.
Right, which is just a wild concept to wrap your head around.
It is. But I gotta say, reading through the source material, I found myself hitting a bit of a wall regarding the whole premise.
Oh, how so?
Well, you look at this environment and it feels less like a rigorous training program and way more like an active execution. Like,
Right.
at what point does a mentor stop teaching a lesson and just start hunting a prey?
That tension right there that drives the entire encounter.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Because to understand that blurred line between, teaching and hunting, we really have to look past the immediate physical combat.
Right.
What we're examining isn't just a fight. It's this highly intricate look at how generational trauma, a cataclysmic history, and a magic system based on a life force called Vitae, how they all weave together.
So it's all
Yeah,
connected.
exactly. Everything in this single bloody encounter is interconnected. The violence isn't just arbitrary cruelty. It functions as this meticulously designed crucible.
Okay, well, I want to break down the mechanics of that crucible, starting with the environment itself, because the setting does, like, a lot of the psychological heavy lifting here.
Oh, absolutely. The environment is basically a character itself.
Right. So we drop right into the middle of this really grim dynamic between a young conscript named Kurien and his massive, terrifying trainer, Master Gossip.
Gossip is just brutal.
Seriously, the scene opens with Gossip's bare heel literally cracking against Kurien's ribs. And they are standing in this frozen, snow-covered stone arena.
Mm-hmm.
And Gossip is just verbally dismantling a student, calling him a cringing dog who lacks the spirit for the pack.
And, the environment operates as a mirror to that hostility. The talk describes this perpetually overcast sky, freezing temperatures, and snow covering cold stone.
It sounds miserable.
It is. It intentionally isolates the characters and just strips away any possible external comfort.
And there's also this crazy detail hanging over the entire scene, literally hanging over them. As Kurien is lying on his back, bleeding into the snow, he looks up and focuses on something called the Heaven's Scar.
Right, the scar, that's a huge lore piece.
It's described as a black void, basically a permanent scar that mars the perfection of the sky. So if you are listening to this right now and trying to picture it, imagine stepping outside and seeing a starless, pitch-black void taking up like a third of your view.
It's terrifying to even think about.
It fundamentally changes how these characters view their own mortality, I think. Just looking at that void, trying to find the will to live, while a literal relic of a past apocalypse stares down at you, it begs a really functional question.
Which is?
Why wouldn't a conscript just lie in the snow and let the elements take over?
Well, physical endurance alone would never be enough to survive someone like Osseth.
Yeah.
To stay on his feet, Kurien desperately needs a psychological anchor.
And the nature of that anchor is where the psychology gets really difficult to parse for me. Kurien finds his resolve by thinking of his master, not Gossip, but a woman named Myasuchi, the Covenness.
Right, she's the overarching figure in his life.
Yeah, we learn she is the one who actually took him from his surrogate merchant family and placed him in this frozen arena. And Kurien's internal monologue about her is intensely possessive and subservient.
It borders on obsession, really.
Completely. He literally states, "No one else may take the breath that Her Majesty has rightfully stolen from me."
Wow.
Yeah. Looking at this from a modern psychological lens, it reads like an incredibly toxic, all-consuming relationship. He doesn't just want to serve her. He believes his respiratory system, like his very breath, is her property.
It's total surrender of self.
Exactly. I'm honestly struggling to categorize this. Is the text framing this as romantic devotion, religious fanaticism, or is it simply the result of systemic brainwashing?
You know, it operates as a terrifying blend of all three of those things. But more importantly, in this specific context, it functions as a vital survival mechanism.
How so?
Well, we have to look at the mechanics of this world's magic system. So San Vitae is described as this force of soul and empowerment. To harness an energy that is abstract and volatile within a biological vessel, you require an ironclad emotional tether.
Wait, so without the tether, what happens?
Without a tether, the energy basically consumes the user. It drives them mad. So Kurien is taking his utter subservience, his complete lack of agency regarding his own life, and he's weaponizing it.
Wow. So his devotion is a tool.
Exactly. He uses his devotion to fuel his will to live. Because if his life belongs to Myasuchi, then Gosseth mathematically does not possess the right to extinguish it.
That is wild. He is literally treating a psychological obsession as a shield against physical trauma.
And he desperately needs that shield too.
Oh, definitely. Because Gosseth doesn't just apply more physical force when Kurien tries to stand up. The trainer shifts his tactics entirely here.
Right, he goes for something much worse.
Yeah. He takes his heavy, chemically treated fur cloak and just tosses it onto an open brazier. And instantly, this miasma of deep, white, toxic smoke billows out and fills the arena.
And Gosseth isn't simply trying to blind his student here. The mechanism he's using is forced biological adaptation through extreme sensory deprivation.
Because the smoke isn't just thick, right? It's laced with disorienting toxins, the smell of burnt flesh, floating embers. It actively burns Kurien's eyes and suffocates him.
To complete sensory overload.
Yeah, and Kurien realizes Gosseth is forcing a contest of the senses, like a test to see if the student can manifest a feral transformation to perceive his opponent through the smoke, or if he will literally just suffocate in the dark.
It's brutal immersion therapy.
Extremely brutal. So blinded and burning, Kurien's mind retreats again. But instead of focusing on Myasuchi this time, he seeks refuge in ancestral history.
Right, he focuses specifically on the history of the Santerrie.
The first one's right.
Yeah, the very first beings to wield San Vitae. The narrative uses the physical trigger of that sensory overload to force a connection to his ancestral memory. As the toxic ash physically fills his lungs, Kurien draws this direct biological parallel to the cataclysm that originally mutated their world.
And the lore drop regarding that cataclysm shifts the entire scale of the story for me. Kurien remembers the accounts of 3 celestial spheres falling from the heaven's scar.
Which is just epic imagery.
Right. And the physical fallout from that impact was a massive cloud of ash that enveloped the entire terrestrial plane.
And we must consider the biomechanical terror of that event. The Anti-Vitae, Kurien's ancestors, were suddenly exposed to raw, uncontrolled Vitae energy carried by that fallout.
Oh, because it was in the air they were breathing.
Exactly. And the text details how the sudden influx of this energy literally shattered the laws of biology. They had to watch their recently deceased rise up and attack them.
Which is horrifying.
Yeah, and they watched family members go completely mad because the human nervous system just couldn't control the Vitae empowerment surging through them. Nature itself warped into monstrous forms or just withered into dust.
And Kurien focuses on the fact that despite the Walking Dead and the mass insanity, his ancestors somehow managed to survive.
They adapted.
Right. They found the biological will to harness the Vitae. They formed the Santerrie clan, establishing rules and accords, and they even fought off factions like the pure-blood humanist disciples groups who, I assume, likely rejected the Vitae-infused biology.
That's right, they were purists, essentially.
Okay, but I want to scrutinize Gosseth's pedagogical method here for a second. Kurien equates the burning in his own lungs to the fallout his ancestors inhaled, and by doing so, his body finally adapts.
Right, he unlocks the vision.
Yeah, he unlocks a new sensory ability and begins seeing Gosseth's life force as this blinding aura through the toxic cloud. But from a functional standpoint, I have to ask, how is blinding a student with toxic ash not just torture disguised as teaching? Is Gosseth actually a genius teacher leveraging ancestral memory, or just a monster utilizing cruelty?
Well, the cruelty is the catalyst. In a universe forged by celestial cataclysms and reanimated corpses, power is inextricably linked to trauma. Gosseth is basically engineering a microcataclysm inside the arena.
Said he's recreating the apocalypse.
Precisely. He forces Kurien to recreate the exact environmental trauma of the Anti-Vitae. So the student's biology has literally no choice but to unlock the same survival instincts the ancestors did.
Wow.
The physiological adaptation, that feral vision, it only manifests when the organism is pushed past the brink of normal pulmonary and ocular endurance. Gosseth understands that comfort breeds biological complacency, and in their ecosystem, complacency is fatal.
Right, so the body has to believe it is dying to unleash the soul's potential.
Ex-
And it works momentarily. Kurien can perceive Gosseth's aura, but the master realizes his student has adapted, and he doesn't just charge blindly into the smoke. We hear this tiny sound. Tink-ta-tink.
Ah, yes.
Gosseth flicks a pebble at an ancient piece of armor hanging on a pillar behind Kurien.
That is such a classic test of sensory prioritization.
What do you mean?
Well, Gosseth radiates bloodlust, but his methodology remains strictly disciplined. He uses the acoustic misdirection, the pebble, to test the fidelity of Kurien's new feral vision.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, if Kurien's head turns toward the sound of the pebble, Gosseth knows the boy's nervous system is still defaulting to normal hearing, rather than truly trusting the new aura vision he just unlocked.
But Kurien recognizes the misdirection. He knows Gosseth is circling into his blind spot, and the student decides to just abandon defense entirely. Which, honestly, this decision introduces us to the extreme physical mechanics of their combat system. Kurien unleashes a maneuver called a blink step.
The biomechanics required to execute a blink step are incredibly severe. It isn't a matter of simply running fast.
No, not at all. The text describes Kurien releasing stored body tension with such violence that the kinetic force literally cracks the solid stone floor beneath his feet.
The amount of force that takes is unimaginable.
Right. He hypercontracts his musculature, essentially using his own skeletal structure as a coiled spring. In a fraction of a second, he flips backward through the air. The velocity is so high that a vortex of air trails behind him. And from his perspective, Gosseth appears to be moving in slow motion. Kurien targets the back of Gosseth's skull to disorient him, then twists midair to strike for the highway of the throat. It is a sequence of highly precise, absolutely lethal strikes.
A sequence that, unfortunately for him, immediately meets the unyielding physics of a master's passive defense.
Yes, it provides a brutal lesson in kinetic displacement. I mean, imagine firing a high-caliber bullet into a block of ballistic gelatin versus firing that exact same bullet into a block of solid steel.
Right. The energy has to go somewhere.
Exactly. Kurien possesses immense velocity, but the text reveals that Gosseth's augmented skin is as strong as armor. Gosseth's biology completely refuses to disperse the kinetic energy, so that energy has literally nowhere to go but backward.
Right back into Kurien.
Yes. Kurien's fist strikes the skull, and his own ring digit violently fractures. He hits the throat, and his hand completely buckles under the force of his own momentum.
The outcome really exposes the vast functional gulf between raw kinetic potential and refined structural mastery. I mean, Kurien generated incredible speed, but because he lacked the biological durability to sustain the impact, his own physical force just destroyed his extremities.
And the blowback cascades through his entire body. Kurien crashes to the arena floor, skidding violently into the stone steps. The sheer physical strain of hypercontracting his muscles for the blink step, combined with the impact of the crash, it causes multiple ribs to break and literally tears the ligaments in his legs.
He's basically destroying himself.
Completely. His concentration shatters. Blood from a laceration on his brow seeps into his eye, physically blinding the feral aura vision he nearly killed himself to unlock just moments ago. So he's lying broken on the floor. His ultimate display of speed just totally failed against Gosseth's passive defense.
Yeah.
So how does the mechanical dynamic of the fight alter when the master finally decides the testing phase is complete?
Well, the dynamic shifts from a lesson in physical endurance to a demonstration of absolute refined lethality. Gosseth ceases observing his students' attempts at adaptation. He manifests his own feral transformation now.
Oh boy.
But the mechanics of his change are leagues beyond Kurien's rudimentary aura vision.
Yeah, Gosseth literally states, "A beast without blades is no beast at all."
A great line.
So good. And with a flick of his wrists, his fingers elongate and transform into these bladed claws. And the narrative provides this terrifying specific detail regarding the physics of these claws. As Gosseth crouches and approaches, the blades spark against the stone. When the tips of the blades brush the snow, the moisture instantly erupts into steam.
And we really must pay close attention to the energy transfer occurring there.
Yeah.
Yes, the text specifies that Gosseth is channeling Evoker's energy into the blades. This is the manipulation of environmental heat and elemental forces. He isn't just altering his physical shape like Kurien did. He is taking a completely separate magical discipline, elemental evocation, and merging it directly with his feral biology to superheat the bone.
That's insane.
It is. It is the hallmark of a true San Vitae master. It's the synergetic culmination of multiple, disparate lineages of power.
So Kurien is essentially facing an organic armored pank that is equipped with a superheated plasma weaponry.
That's a very accurate way to put it.
Lying on the ground, analyzing this approaching threat, the student concludes that biological survival is just no longer a mathematical possibility. He's dead. But his logic takes a really fascinating turn here. He completely discards the grand rules of the Santerrie clan and all those survival accords that govern their society. He decides that if his death is inevitable, his sole objective now is ensuring Gosseth bears a permanent physical mark of the encounter when the master inevitably reports back to Myasuchi.
The student's internal motivation narrows from self-preservation to just pure symbolic spite.
Spite, yeah.
And it is fueled entirely by the psychological need for his master's external validation.
Right, because Kurien actually notes to himself that he would face forces far greater than Gosseth if it merely meant Myasuchi might acknowledge him again.
Wow.
To achieve this, he needs a catalyst to summon his own feral claws. So he utilizes the burning sensation of the blood seeping into his eye from his fractured brow. He physically dabs his own blood, hoping the external contact with the vitae contained within his bloodstream will force his damaged body to transform.
It acts as a desperate biological trigger. By exposing the vitae in his blood to the external environment, he's basically attempting to shock his own nervous system into a defensive mutation.
And the mutation triggers just in time. Gosseth is suddenly looming over him and plunges a superheated claw directly toward Kurien's chest. But Kurien's reaction defies every evolutionary instinct we have.
He doesn't dodge.
He does not attempt to dodge. He intentionally lunges forward, pulling his body into the path of the fatal blow. He allows Gosseth's claw to pierce his chest solely to close the physical distance, bringing him within striking range of Gosseth's face.
That is just incredible.
Right. 3 of Kurien's fingers finish transforming into these blood-covered blade claws, and he slashes deep, cavernous lines across Gosseth's brow and eye. Gosseth howls and reels backward, and Kurien collapses onto the steps, bleeding heavily from his chest and mouth. I mean, consider the economy of combat here. It's an intentional sacrifice of one's entire structural integrity just to introduce a minor flaw into an opponent's puffix system. It's like sacrificing your king in chess just to scratch the opponent's queen.
Right. From the perspective of evolutionary self-preservation, the action is entirely illogical.
Completely madness.
However, if we examine the mechanics of Kurien psychology, it represents the ultimate expression of detachment from self. Victory, in this specific context, is not defined by survival. Kurien fully anticipates biological death.
He knows he's done.
Yes. His victory is mathematically proving that his spirit and his devotion to Myasuchi cannot be eradicated without extracting a permanent physical cost from the master who deemed him weak.
And the final imagery of the excerpt illustrates that psychological detachment perfectly. Kurien lies on the stone, intimately aware of his slowing heart rate and his fading breath. He watches the splatter of his own blood pooling on the snow. And as the red pool expands to fill his fading vision, he begins to laugh.
Oh, wow.
The sound of his own involuntary laughter fills his ears as he actively bleeds out.
And that laughter serves as a profound psychological indicator. We are literally listening to the sound of a mind that has completely severed the concept of victory from the necessity of its own biological survival.
It's chilling. Taking a step back from the immediate violence of the text, we have explored the terrifying synergy of the Vitae magic system today, where physical power is forged through sensory deprivation and elemental manipulation. We've broken down how the brutal history of a cataclysmic sky shapes the biology of the descendants. And most importantly, we have examined the chilling reality of a protagonist whose most dangerous weapon isn't a magical spell or a physical strike, but his complete and total disregard for his own continued existence.
The narrative really demands that we examine the extreme limits of biological endurance alongside the inherently dangerous nature of absolute subservience. I mean, when a conscious entity ties its entire conceptual worth to the validation of an external authority, the capacity for self-destruction becomes functionally limitless.
So I encourage you, listening to this deep dive, to really reflect on the mechanics of your own motivations. You are not dodging superheated magical claws in a frozen arena under a void in the sky, but consider the modern, everyday equivalents.
Right, we all have them.
To what degree do you push your own physical or mental limits? What pieces of your structural integrity, like your time, your physical health, your psychological peace of mind, are you willing to permanently sacrifice just to gain the acknowledgement of someone you revere, whether it is a boss, an academic mentor, or even a partner?
Because it remains a fundamental vulnerability of the human condition. It's merely amplified to a mystical extreme within the parameters of this story.
Exactly. And as we conclude this deep dive, I want to leave you with an unsettling structural question to ponder on your own. Consider the possibility that Kurien's biology somehow manages to survive this horrific physical trauma.
Which is possible.
Right. He is currently lying on the stone, finding genuine auditory joy in the sound of his own life force draining into the snow. His psychological framework has been entirely shattered and rebuilt by extreme violence into a system that rewards its own destruction. If this arena is merely the boot camp, what happens to the systemic balance of power in this world when a mind possessing that deeply broken, completely fearless psychology is finally handed the reins of true, unchecked, magical authority? Does the surviving student inevitably become a far more terrifying variable than the master?